In today's lesson, we are just going to be looking at the indicators, and we are going to be looking at our economic indicators. Now, in the previous lesson, we have looked at the different phases of the business cycle, is that? Yeah. And then we also looked at the different phases and the composition of our business cycle. And I think we identified the trend line. We also identified the amplitude. We also identified the length. And we looked at what this signifies in our economic cycle, right? And in today's lesson, we are just going to be looking at some of the indicators that we have. Now, when we talk about an indicator is anything that communicates some economic information, or that tells us something about how the level of economic activity is on the real ground. Is that correct? Now, in this case, our economic indicators, we generally have two types of them. Okay? Our indicators, we generally have two types of them. We have what are called economic indicators, and we have the other ones that are called non-economic indicators. Non-economic indicators. Now, our economic indicators, these are indicators that speak about the health state of the economy. Okay? Our economic indicators, they tend to give a signal, an economic signal to the analyst. Is that correct? And generally, examples of economic indicators that we have, so I'm just going to classify them. Because according to your exam guideline, you would now need to know both indicators. But if I remember, there was a paper, the question paper that I once saw, where learners were told to discuss in detail the non-economic indicators. And so that's why I'm separating this, so that you know this is economic, this is non-economic. Okay? Now, our economic indicators, the first example of an economic indicator that we have is what is called the leading indicator. Okay? The other type of an indicator that we have that is economic is what is called the lagging indicator. The other type of an indicator that we have is what is called the coincident indicator. The other type of an indicator that we also have is what is called the composite indicator. Okay? Now, our leading indicator, when you talk about a leading indicator, we are saying this is the indicator that reaches the peak before the business cycle reaches its peak. In other words, a leading indicator, if I was to draw a business cycle, here, and then we have our trend line like that, then that's our cycle. Okay? And then if this is coincident, if this is the normal trend that we have, we can assume that this represents the coincident. Okay? This that we are seeing in white, it represents the coincident indicator because it is the one that shows the actual position of the economic cycle, the actual position of the business cycle. In other words, when it goes up, it means the level of economic activity is also going up. When it reaches the peak, it means the level of economic activity has also reached its peak. When it starts going down and it reaches a trough, it means the level of economic activity has reached also its trough. And this one is called a coincident indicator. Okay? But we are going to look at examples of such indicators. Then the next one that we are talking about is the leading indicator. Now, what it would mean with the leading indicator, it reaches the peak before the economy reaches its peak. And it reaches the trough before the economy reaches its trough. Now, on this side of my cycle, these are number of years. Number of years. Okay? Maybe this one was 20, 20, 20, 22, 20, 24, and then it continues like that, maybe 20, 25, 20, 26, like that. And this side we have the GDP, right? The real GDP. This one is the real GDP, which is the level of economic activity. Okay? If we look at our GDP, maybe we are talking about billions, then this one was 0, maybe this one is 10 billion, and this one maybe is 20 billion, this one can be 30, this one can be 40, and this one can be 50 billion. Okay? Now what it means is, with our orange line now, we said it represents the leading indicator. Why is it representing the leading indicator? It is because it reaches the peak before the coincident actually reaches the peak. Are we together? This one reached the peak when? In 2020. But the coincident, when is it going to reach the peak? In 2022. You understand what we are saying? So what it means is, this one is a leading indicator because it reaches the peak before the economy reaches its peak. Now, why is this very important? The leading indicators, it gives us the general direction that is being taken by the economy. And it then helps the economists to try and plan, because now they know, oh, okay, this is the direction that we are heading to. So they can now put some plans in place well ahead of time. Are we together? So this one reaches the peak before the economy actually reaches its peak. Okay? And that's an example of a leading indicator. And our leading indicators, the examples that we can talk of our leading indicators, we have things like job advertisements. Okay? Now if you see newspaper advertisements, now we have plenty of them, but learners don't have to memorize all of them. You just need to know one for the purposes of the exam. Are we together? But even if it comes as an essay, remember this one is a possible essay question. So when it comes as an essay, you cannot give more than one example. Okay? So don't crack your heads to try and understand all the examples and say, all these are leading indicators. Just remember one. Okay? Now in our leading indicators, we have an example of job advertisements. This one, job adverts. Job adverts is an example of a leading indicator. In other words, if we see that there is a plenty jobs that are now being advertised, it means businesses are taking a position. They are trying to increase on the level of economic activity. So what does that mean? It means we are slowly going to get into the phase. If it was at the trough and we see job advertisements, then it means the businesses are preparing to come out of the trough. They are now beginning to increase on economic activity. That's why they are hiring more people. Do you understand? So job adverts is a good example of a leading indicator. Okay? And then we also have even other things like money supply. Okay? Money supply is also another example of a leading indicator. Why are we saying money supply is a leading indicator? Because when there is an increase in the amount of money that is being provided in the economy, or that is circulating in the economy, if there's an increase in money supply, which is that instrument by the SAP, is that so? If they increase on money supply, it's an indication that there is going to be an increase in economic activity, because the aggregate demand is going to increase. And when aggregate demand increases, what happens to business activities? They also increase. Are we together? So job advertisements, money supply, all those, they are leading indicators, because they tell us the general direction that is going to be followed by the economy. Are we together? If we see money supply reducing, then it means the economy aggregate demand is going to go down, which would now mean that the economy is going to dampen, is going to come out of the peak, probably starts into a recession and possibly go into a depression. That's what it would mean. So I'm giving you two examples. of leading indicators. We said we have job advertisements, and the other one can be money supply. Are we together? Now, leading indicators, these are indicators that reach the peak before the economy actually reaches its peak, and they reach the trough before the economy actually reaches its trough. Are we together? Then the other type of indicator that we have is what is called the lagging indicator. Now, with our lagging indicator our lagging indicator, it generally shows the peak when the business is already left the peak. It generally goes into the peak when the business is already out of the, when the economy is already out of the peak. And it will reach the trough when the economy is already out of its trough. Now, this one that we are seeing here in pink lines is what we can say is the lagging indicator. Now, what does it show? It kind of, a lagging indicator, it shows or it confirms where the economy was. A lagging indicator is an indicator that shows us where the economy was. In other words, it shows us where the economy is coming from. In other words, it reaches its peak when the economy is already out of the peak. And it will reach the trough when the economy is already way out of the trough. Are we together? According to my business cycle here, you would now realize that the peak of the economy, the coincident, reached the peak when? In 2020, 2022. Is that correct? But this lagging indicator is going to reach its peak when? In 2024. So it's just confirming where the economy was. Okay? And this is what we call a lagging indicator. Now, an example of a lagging indicator is the total commercial vehicles that are sold. The total commercial vehicles that are sold. They are a confirmation of a lagging indicator. The total of commercial vehicles that are sold. Okay? And then you would also find that another example of a lagging indicator is the average prime rate that is charged by banks. Are we together? The average prime rate that is charged by banks. Remember when we looked at our monetary policy, we looked at money and banking in grade 11. We said we have two types of interest rates that we have. We have one which is called the repo rate, and the second one is the prime rate. Are we together? Now, the repo rate is what the Reserve Bank charges commercial banks when they borrow money. Okay? And the prime lending rate is the rate at which commercial banks advance credit to the public. Okay? To households and to businesses. The rate at which commercial banks advance credit to them is what we call the prime lending rate. Okay? Now, our prime lending rate is a lagging indicator because when we see that the prime lending rate is increasing, okay, it actually shows that the economy is reaching its peak, has reached its peak. The economy has actually reached its peak. The economy has reached its peak, and the reason why the prime lending rate is increasing is because we want to dampen the economy. Is that correct? Now, it's confirming where the economy was. Do you understand? It's confirming where the economy was. Because the prime lending rate cannot increase before the economy reaches its peak. It can only increase when the economy has reached its peak and now we want to dampen the economy. It can only go down when the economy is already at its trough and now we want to increase the level of economic activity. Are we together there? So you will find that the prime lending rate is an example of a lagging indicator. Okay? It's an example of a lagging indicator. And then we have the other one that we call the coincident indicator, which is the one that is shown by those white lines. Now, our coincident indicator, this shows the position of the economic activity in the economy. This serves to confirm the position or the level of economic activity. Are we together? it shows the level of economic activity. Are we together? And approximately you would find that the coincident indicator reaches its peak when the economy is at its peak. And approximately when it reaches the trough, it means the economy will also be at its trough. Are we together? So the coincident is the one that shows the way exactly the economy is. Are we together? And an example of a coincident indicator is we are talking about the retail sales. The retail sales is an example of coincident indicator. Okay? When we see our retail sales increasing, it means the aggregate demand has gone up. Is that so?
Yes.
The demand for goods and services in the products market has increased. Is that so? So our retail sales is an indication of coincident indicator. Is an example of a coincident indicator, and it shows us where exactly the economy is. When you see the retail sales beginning to go down, then it means people are not buying anymore. That's a decrease in aggregate demand. And then that would confirm that the economy is off its peak. Now it's in the recession. Or possibly worse still, it's now entering into our depression. Okay? So our retail sales is an example of a coincident indicator. Okay? Now, we also have the other one that is called a composite indicator. Now, in South Africa, in the context of South Africa, we don't really use a composite indicator. Okay? The ones that we normally use is the leading, the lagging, and the coincident. Okay? But the composite, I will just explain it for the purposes of the exam. Now, our composite indicator, dear learners, it's an indicator that is made up of at least two of these previous three indicators. If our indicators is made up of more than one, then we say it's composite. In other words, it has characteristics of both leading and lagging, or leading and coincident, or lagging and coincident. You understand what you are saying? And that's a composite. When you say composite, from physical science, a compound substance is a substance that is made up of two elements. Is that correct? That's what makes up a compound substance. It's a substance that is made up of two elements. Now, when we say composite in economics, we are saying it's made up of two indicators. It's a combination of two indicators. Are we together? So you will find that with our composite indicator, normally it will be showing the average of the two indicators. Okay? It might be a combination maybe of the leading and lagging, and it shows the average. Are we together? Or it can be a combination of the coincident and leading, and then it shows the average. And then we are saying that one is a composite indicator. You understand what we are saying? So a composite indicator for the purposes of exams is an indicator that is made up of at least two other indicators. Are we together? Right. And then these types of indicators that we have looked at here, both the leading, the lagging, the coincident, and the composite. Okay? They are all what we call economic indicators. They are all examples of economic indicators. Now, in the exam, when the examiner asks you to write an essay discussing in detail the economic indicators, learners must understand they are supposed to be discussing leading, lagging, coincident, and composite. That's what we are supposed to discuss. Are we together? If it is like in the context of that question that I was talking about, where learners were asked about non-economic indicators, discuss in detail the non-economic indicators. Are we together? Learners are not supposed to talk about this. Because if you talk about this, you are talking about economic indicators. You are supposed to talk about the ones that we are going to be looking at now. Now, our non-economic. We have the first one that we have is what is called a trend line. A trend line is non-economic. We also have the other one that we know that is called a length. Okay? We also have the other one that we know that is called the amplitude. We also have the other one that we know that is called the moving average. And the last one that we know is called the extrapolation. Now, these are non-economic indicators. These ones that you are seeing on the board, they are non-economic indicators. A trend line, the length, the amplitude, the moving average, and extrapolation. They are referred to in economics as non-economic indicators. Are we together? Now, let's just look at what we mean when we say the trend line. Now, when we talk about the trend line, this is the line that shows the general direction that is being followed by the economy, that is going to be taken by the economy. It shows the general direction that is being taken by the economy. In other words, if we take this to be our business cycle, then we have our trend line like that. It generally indicates that the economy is on an upward trajectory. Is that so? It means the economy is growing. Are we together? Okay? If our trend line is horizontal, then it means the economy is neither growing nor on a decline. Is that correct? Mm-hmm. If our trend line is downward sloping, then it means the economy is going down. Are we together? So our trend line, generally it shows the general direction that is followed by the economy. Okay? Now, this is what we need to understand. When we talk about our trend line will never start on zero. Okay? It always starts from some point higher up, okay, on the vertical axis. Why is that so? It is because there is no economy where there is zero production. There is no economy that has zero production. Even if it is in a war zone, there is some element of production that takes place. Are we together? So our economy, it means our trend line cannot start from zero. It never starts from the origin. It always starts from a certain point on the vertical axis. Okay? Because there is a level of economic activity that is taking place in every country. Okay? So that's our trend line. And you now need to understand that the ideal situation with a trend line is, a trend line generally is supposed to be a positive trend line. If it is a positive trend line, then it shows that there is economic growth. Is that correct? And that would be good news for every government. Is that correct? So our general trend is supposed to be a positive trend. Okay? Right. And then we also have the other one that is called the length. Now when we talk about the length is the number of years that it takes the economic cycle to complete its 4 phases and 2 turning points. It's the number of years it takes our economic cycle to complete the 4 phases and 2 turning points. That's what a length is. Okay? Now in this economic cycle that we have here,
an economic cycle to complete
4 phases and 2 turning points. That's our length, the number of years that it will take. Okay? Now, if we take this to be our economic cycle, okay, what it would mean is, this is our peak, and that one is another peak. Is that correct? And you would find that books, textbooks, they normally say it's peak to peak or trough to trough. Is that correct? Now, what is happening there? We are saying from the peak, it takes 1, 2, 3, 4. That's the 4 phases, right? And our 2 turning points, we had a peak here and a peak there. Is that correct? So it means it's a complete length. But what is the length is nothing else but the number of years that it takes. If this was 20, 22, and this one probably is 20, 30, then it means it is, our length is how long? 28 years. 8 years, sorry. 8 years. Our length there is 8 years. And then now we can name what type of economic cycle it is. That takes 8 years. Are we together? Okay? So this is what we call the length. It shows the number of years it takes the economic cycle to complete its 4 phases and the 2 turning points. It has got to be the number of years that it takes.
So that means the juggler cycle, this one. I'm saying juggler.
Yeah. Is this one juggler?
Yes.
It's a juggler cycle, isn't it? Because our juggler cycle takes how many years? 7 to 11 years. Are we together? So this one is an example of a juggler cycle. Well done. Okay? This one is an example of a juggler cycle. If it had taken 5 years, then it was going to be a kitchen cycle. Is that correct? If it had taken 50 years, then it was going to be contractive. Are we together then? You understand? Right, so those are the different economic cycles. But what we are looking at is, we are measuring that using the number of years that it takes the cycle to complete. Okay? And then we have the other one, so that's our length. And then the next one, so this one will be our length. And then the next one is what is called the amplitude. Now our amplitude shows the distance between the turning point and the trend line. The difference between the turning point and our trend line. Like in this case, we are saying the distance from there to there. That's our amplitude. I'm going to name it A. The distance between the turning point and the trend line. Okay? And then if it was with this -1, then it meant that it was going to be from there to there. That becomes our amplitude. Okay? So this is our amplitude. This is the amplitude. You understand? Right. Now what does the amplitude show? Our amplitude, it is the difference between the total output and the peak and a trough. Are we together? And then we said it is the intensity, it shows the intensity. In other words, the intensity of the underlying factors that have caused that business cycle to take place. Which means if the amplitude is very far away from the trend line, then it means the underlying factors are more severe. You understand? The distance that the turning point is from the trend line is what we call the amplitude. Now it shows generally the intensity of the underlying factors that have caused the business cycle. Okay? Which means the further away the amplitude is from the trend line, the more severe the underlying factors. You understand what I'm saying? If it is right, it means here the amplitude is closer to the trend line, right? Than here. Do you understand? So what does that mean? It means that this factor here that caused the economic cycle to turn from a peak into a downward trend was less severe than this one here. Do you understand? That's what we are saying when we say it measures the intensity of the underlying factors. If the amplitude is smaller, it shows that the intensity is less. If the amplitude is wider, far away, then it shows that the intensity is more. Are we together? Right, that's with our amplitude. And then you do now also need to know that when you talk about, like for example, let me just give you an example of the factors. You would find that during an upswing normally, we do have high levels of inflation, isn't it?
Yes.
Inflation might increase. Is that correct? During an upswing. Now, the extent to which the inflation has increased would differ. Sometimes it can increase from maybe 3% to 6%. Okay? Then we dampen the economy because now we are using inflation targeting, isn't it? Or sometimes if we are not using inflation targeting, inflation can increase from maybe 3% to 100%. Are we together? Creating a hyper condition. Is that correct? So the underlying factors, the factors that cause the shift or that cause the deviation from the trend line are not going to be the same. They differ from one cycle to the other cycle. They differ from one country to the other country. They also differ based on what really was the underlying forces. Are we together? Right. So that's what we are talking about with our amplitude. Then the next one is what is called the moving average. Now, when we talk about the moving average, learners, it's a mathematical method that is used to calculate a time series. It's a mathematical way of calculating time series. Okay? And normally, we are using the average values. Normally, we are using the average values. Okay? And normally, why we do this is we do this to try and smooth out the cycles. Normally, the moving averages are normally used because we want to smooth out the economic cycles. Are we together then? I will just give you how we calculate the moving averages. Okay? Moving average. Now, I will just give you maybe number of years, maybe it's year, okay? And then we have output here. Output. Okay? Okay? Year 1, year 2, year 3, year 4, year 5, year 6. We can continue like that. Okay? Now, let's say output for year 1 maybe was 20 billion. For year 2, it went down to, okay, not down, but it went up to 25. And then maybe year 3, it went down to 15. Year 4, it went up maybe to 30 billion. Year 5, we don't know. And year 6, we don't know. Now, we have two types of moving averages that we have, dear learners, at this stage. We use what is called the 5-year moving average, and we also have the other one that is called the 3-year moving average. Are we together? Now, we said I will just use a 3-year moving average here. Are we together? So what you do, if it is a 3-year moving average, this is how you calculate. It's the output for year 1 plus year 2 plus year 3 divided by 3. Because it's 3 years. It's an average. Are we together there? Output for year 1 plus year 2 plus year 3 divided by 3. Because it's a 3-year average. If it is a 5-year, then you are going to say plus year 4 plus year 5 divided by 5. Because it's 5 years. Are we together there? Right. So this is what we'll do. In year 1, our output was 20 billion, right? Plus year 2, it was 25 billion. Plus year 3, it's 15 billion. Divided by 3. Is that correct? So what it means now is, in this case, it's 20 plus 25, that's 45, plus 15, that's 60. So it's going to be 60 billion divided by 3, and your answer is going to be 20 billion, like that. You understand? So this 20 billion becomes what we are forecasting for the next year, 20. Do you understand? right? Then you go again. Now we have done for year 5. We have written year 5. We calculated it's 20. Okay? Year 6 now. Remember, we are forecasting. We are forecasting. We are trying to read where are we going. What is going to be the likely output in year 5 if we are using 3-year moving average. Okay? So what we did was we calculated year 1, year 2, year 3 divided by 3. Is that correct?
Yes.
Then we got our 20. Then that 20, the next year. Are we together? Then you also go, now we have done this one. So it means this one is out. Okay? The next year, we are calculating 1, 2, 3. The next one, there. Do you understand? Okay. The next one, second round, it's going to be 25 billion. This one, are we together? Plus 15, this one. Is that correct? Plus 30, this one. Are we together then? Divided by 3, because it's a 3-year moving average. Okay? Then it's 40, 70. So it's 70 divided by 3. What is 70 divided by 3? That's 23.3. You guys, where did you do your math? 23.3. Right, so it's 23.3, I think.
Yes.
Okay, so what it means now is for this year, it's going to be 23.3. Are we together? Then if we want for year 7 now, it means this one is out. So now we are going to say 1, 2, 3 divided by 3. Then it gives us for year 7. You see why it's called moving? Because it throws away the previous year, it takes in the next year. Like in the first one, it was 1, 2, 3. Are we together? Then we got that answer. Then we cancelled the first year. Now the next one is 1, 2, 3. We got the answer. We put it there, cancels that other year. It goes 1, 2, 3. Get the answer, put it there, cancel the previous year. Do you understand? So it can continue like that if it is a 3-year. If it is a 5-year moving average, then it would mean this 20 billion plus 25 plus 15 plus 30 plus 20. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Are we together? Then it would mean that what would be the next one? 20 plus that, that's 45, that's 60, that's 90, that's 110 divided by 5. That's 21, 22. 22, right? So it means the next one will be a 22. Are we together?
So with the 3-year, we skip, you were adding 1 in advance.
Yes.
With the 5-year, you don't add anything.
No, it depends on the information that you are getting. Here, remember, it's a 5-year, so it's taking more of the data. And I only have a few years. But still the concept remains the same. Okay? Then it means we have crossed out this. Is that so? Then now we have this. So it's now going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Is that correct? And then you divide by 5. Then the answer, you put it there. You cross out this one. You go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You get the answer. Divide by 5. Then the answer, you put it on year 8. You cross out this one. You go again. The answer, you get it, you put it on year 9. Like that, like that, like that. That's why it's called a moving average. So it's an arithmetic way of calculating the time series. And why it is intended to do that? It's intended to do that because it tends to smoothen out the cycle. It will smoothen the cycle out. Instead of us having 20, 25, 15, 30, 20, 22, and like that, like that, like that. We are just going to have an average that we are going to have. And then we'll end up with a very smooth curve that we have. You understand what we are saying? Now, these moving averages, This is how it's calculated. We have two types of them. We have a 3-year moving average and a 5-year moving average. Now, in your section B, especially the 4-mark kind of questions, a learner can be asked to calculate the moving averages for 4 months. You should know how to calculate it. Give us the formula first. From the formula, substitute into the formula. Do your calculations. Are we together? You understand what we are saying? Eh? Yes. Or sometimes they can say, using the 3-year moving average, calculate the value of output in year 7. So it means you need to calculate. Give us the formula, substitute into the formula, calculate the value for year 7, and then you are done with your moving averages. So what are we doing? We also use this as a tool to try and predict where we are going. Okay? And at the same time, the moving average becomes very important to us because it tends to smoothen out the business cycles. Do you understand? Then the last one that we are going to talk about, which is non-economic, is extrapolation. Now, extrapolation, learners, it looks at the past and use the past information to predict the future. Are we together? Like you now recall that we were talking about the certain cycles that maybe if our economy is going through maybe or is following a jugular cycle, then it would mean that every other 10 years or so we are going to be having this particular experience. Is that correct? Okay, so this is what we know. We are using past information to help read into the future. And all those are non-economic indicators. Are we together? So what are the economic indicators? Our economic indicators, there are 4. We have leading, lagging, coincident, and composite. These are the economic indicators. And we have looked at the examples of each one of them. Okay? And then, what are the non-economic indicators? Non-economic indicators, they look at trend line, amplitude, length, extrapolation, moving averages. Are we together? Those are the non-economic indicators. So sometimes when the learners are asking the exam, please don't confuse these things. Are we together? You understand what we are saying? Yes. Then it should be very, very clear when it's like that. Okay. Yes. Now this is all that we were discussing on our economic indicators and the non-economic indicators. If you like the video, click the like button. Remember to subscribe to the channel. All the best in your studies.